One of the attributes of the patriarchy is the ability for it to change forms. If they use the tactics of force and they discover that it is an era that force cannot work, then they change into the tactics of softness. They change into a tactics that will make you, who is supposed to be a victim and oppressed in the system, to be more accepting of it. They know that everybody enjoys power and enjoys being the main character at a point. So what they will do is to make it look as if you are the main character in the conversation, just so that you can accept it. Concerning this video that I made, that I said traditions did not benefit women even before religion, and if women are leaving religion back to tradition, they should think twice, because tradition has never benefited women even before religion. And it has met a lot of comments where people are saying religion, that tradition at a point was matriarchal. I understand that people are trying to give history and give examples like within the Igbo community and all, but I'm here to ask, these traditions of saying when a woman loses her husband, she cuts her hair and they wash water from the cups to give her to drink, and she will have to be in a grieving mode for a certain period of time. All those traditions, were they post-colonial era or neo-colonial era or pre-colonial era? That is something that I want to ask you. They know that you will enjoy it when they make you the main character in your own life. So they are telling you that before now, emphasizing to you now that these African traditions were matriarchal before colonialism, is because they no longer have maximum benefit as to the patriarchy that exists within religion as they would like, or as it used to be. So because of that, it is now changing form to lure you back into tradition, which is not also a pleasurable place for you. Traditions were never made with your benefit at heart. Traditions has never benefited you as a woman. Modernization, socialization, and time is what is changing the trajectory. Within religion, a few years ago, men were pushing for their wives to be religious. They wanted to marry very religious women. Why? Because already the church was doing a very good job at indoctrinating women to be subservient. If a woman seems to be a stubborn person, what they will do then... Sorry, I lost the audio from here, so I'm just going to have to do a voiceover. So what they will do is to report her to her pastor, and he's able to convince her that if she does not submit to her husband, God will be angry with her. Now, after some time, pastors began losing as much respect from men, because pastors were beginning to, because of modernization, pastors were beginning to preach messages, because women were leaving the church and women were being angry at the church for promoting their suffering. So the message in the church started changing form to explaining to women that submission is not such a bad thing, and their husbands will have to love them first before they submit. So these men are beginning to be angry because they are required to love their wives. So it is a form of responsibility that the church is giving to them. And women are reading the Bible more, and they are seeing passages such as the both of you have to submit to one another. And that sort of not make men to be so happy. Another thing that happens is that pastors were gaining more power over men. So it's kind of like the wives were being respectful to their pastors and honoring pastors more than they honored their husbands, which is one thing that men do not like. Don't forget, I have a video where I say most men suffer from narcissism, which is the feeling of grandiosity. So they cannot wrap their head around another man being higher than them in authority. And when pastors started to emphasize messages such as tithe and offering, it also provoked them. Not because they had a problem with paying tithe or giving offering to church, but they were not giving and receiving honor for giving, because they were made to believe that giving is given to God. So the pastor does not have to appreciate you or make you feel grandiose about it. Basically, religion is beginning to hold them accountable for their behaviors as well, and women are having access to scriptures where they are reading more and more the Bible and realizing that they have more and more power within certain religions and they are maximizing it here. So men are angry now, and a lot of them are tagging these pastors as thieves. So they cannot hold these pastors for saying that their husbands have to love them, because obviously it's in the Bible and they cannot argue that. So because of that, they are condemning the entire idea of religion, and then they are beginning to say African traditions are better than Western cultures. They are beginning to say that these religions are Western cultures, which I agree that they are still Western, but at the end of the day, they are not rejecting religion because of tithe and offerings. They are rejecting religion because it makes them subservient, and that is what they do not want. They will never take the idea of one man being superior to them, not at all. And the fact that religion no longer gives them total power and control over the lives of women is alarming to them. I promise you, if the church begins to emphasize the need for women to be submissive and revisit scriptures that gives women rights, you will see a whole influx of men in church. But within tradition, they have a whole lot of power, and their power has no boundary within tradition. In tradition, no matter what happens to you as a woman, there's always a way to protect the man. And there is absolutely no consequences for their actions within tradition. But they cannot paint it to you that they want you back to tradition because of this reason. Because if they do that, you will not accept it. You have more freedom and more power now than it used to be back then. So because of that, they will deceive you to believe that they do not want religion for other reasons. So they want you back into accepting tradition. They tell you that the Bible is also misogynistic, pastors are thieves, the Bible is this. Yes. Then they will not tell you that there is no manual to tradition. At least Christianity has manual. Religion does not have. Tradition does not have manual. So whatever it pleases them is what they will do. Can't you see the emphasis they put on polygamy? Can't you see the emphasis that they put on saying your husband is your Lord? Your husband is like a god to you. But one thing that they know is that if they tell you that I'm going to use this thing to bring you back to tradition where I will have absolute control and power over you, you are not going to accept it. And because they cannot really use force, because now the system has consequences to their action. But if you maintain within that tradition, can't you see how the wave of men that are shouting that men are polygamous in nature of late? Are you not seeing a lot of them saying monogamy is not an African thing? Are you seeing the wave of men shouting that polygamy is very African and it is normal? And they've gotten a lot of women to be in agreement with them that if once a man has money, he can be polygamous. In fact, even if he does not have money, they want to be polygamous, because the more women they have under their control, knowing fully well that they do not control all women, they only control the ones they can marry. So they will want to marry as many as possible so that they have as many as possible women under their control. So, and within religion, especially Christianity, it does not permit polygamy. So that is why you see they rage. In fact, they are more angry at Christianity than they are of other religions, because Christianity is one of the religions that does not permit polygamy. When they are talking about polygamy, they do not talk about it as something that even you, how do you feel? They are not considering how you feel as the woman in the system. They are just considering how they feel. They will even give you some really crazy ideas and tell you that people were doing it for so many reasons. Then they will try looking for good reasons why polygamy should exist for you. They will say giving birth to multiple children in case of war or anything like that. Those things are not true. It is for their self-gratification and nothing more. Hence, they are pushing the idea that the African tradition was matriarch. It was a matriarch, or it was matriarchal. It was never matriarchal. They only want you to believe that it is matriarchal so that you would think that when it comes to decision making in African traditions, as if you have a say in it. You do not have a say in it. What they do is, when they tell you that as a woman, it makes you to live in oblivion of your realities, of the things you're seeing around you, of the things you've seen. You have spoken to your grandparents, your great grandmother, anyone who have had the opportunity to see those women. And you know for a fact, if you want to critically analyze the life of your great grandmother, you know that there's no point of African tradition that was matriarchal. So it was never about you. The idea, listen, I know that you can read books that tells you things, but one thing about me is I hardly recommend books to people. Not because I don't read. I read books. I want you to read books as well. But read books with a sound mind to be able to connect it to your reality and your surroundings. If you're unable to connect those things to your surroundings, you have no business believing it. You can give me a book written by the most intelligent person or the most prominent person, and I will still disagree with what the person said. I'm telling you, there is no African tradition that is matriarchal. That does not mean it is written in any book. There are books that states that African traditions are matriarchal, but I do not agree with them, and that is my opinion. Even this colonialism that they are talking about, it did not affect, it did not get to every part of Africa. There are still certain parts of Africa, even in Nigeria here, there are places it did not get to. When you talk about the West and Southeast, yes, and then far north, but there are places in Nigeria here that still did not experience colonialism, and the people still have their ancestral beliefs. They still have those beliefs. They still practice them, things that existed before colonialism. Everybody, when people are trying to make analysis in Nigeria, they like to focus their analysis on the West, the South, the West, the Southeast, and maybe the North. There are places, there are other places, there are other ethnicities in Nigeria that have not experienced this thing. Western education has not gotten there yet, and so is Western influence. Western influence has not gotten to those places yet. When you are addressing your issues, address it based on your reality. I don't even have so much, I do not dwell in history that much. The reason is because in as much as it's good to know your history, my reality currently and my future is what is most important to me. If you tell me that African traditions before African tradition pre-colonial era, post-colonial era, or whatever era was matriarchal, that does not bother me. The reason is, what about now? What about the traditions now? They are definitely not matriarchal. If I go back to African traditions, it has already had, if you believe that it is the Western influence that made our traditions patriarchal, already our present traditions is already patriarchal. So if I go back with you to believe that it is the matriarchy, it is not going to change the trajectory of my life, because it already has the influence of the West, which is the patriarchy, if that is what you believe. So I can still argue that I will not still go back to being traditional. Reason is because it already, even let's even assume that African traditions used to be matriarchal, I will still not want to go back, because already the influence is here. So which means it is still the patriarchy. It is just me that will live in oblivion that is the matriarchy. And a lot of you need to interface with these traditions. Go and find out what your for every topic of discussion when it comes to marriage, find out the history and your traditions of marriage, childbirth. Find out your traditions. What does your tradition say about that? Whatever topic it is, go and find out from the people of your village what their traditions actually entail. You would discover that a lot of these things were never matriarchal, because their attributes are not matriarchal. For you to say something is matriarchal or patriarchal, it means it has the attributes of those things. I know that a lot of arguments come from this argument of saying African women do not take on their husbands' names after marriage. That does not change the quality of life that I live now. Even if I take on my husband's name or not, it does not change anything. I know that that is a Western culture, but it still does not mean African is matriarchal, because wives were not ownerships. Wives were owned even in Africa. They may not change name, but they were still owned. They were still considered as properties. They were still living as slaves. So at the end of the day, it is just a grammar tussle. It's a grammar game. So the patriarchy is still the patriarchy, trying to paint to you that your life back then was the matriarchy. It's just grammar they are trying to use to convince you into going back to your struggle. So I just disagree.